David will be well known to many of you, of course. He's the current Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association President. He's also the General Manager of Tipperary, just south of Darwin. We're having a slight change of topic. We're going to look more at a Thoughts from the North type theme for his presentation today. So we'll try to squeeze some questions in towards the end as well. So would you welcome David Connolly?
Thanks very much, John. Droughtmaster Society President Todd, Society Directors, life members of the Droughtmaster Society, and the CEO Simon Gleeson, thank you very much for the kind invitation to come and speak at your 60th anniversary, which is quite an achievement. I thought to myself, a top-end Northern Territory cattleman speaking to a Droughtmaster Society, I'm not sure what it'll have to offer, so this should be quick. But then I saw that my name was left off the agenda, and I thought, as Blair does, rather than be, negative about that, I thought, what a positive sign. I get to speak about what I like, mostly for however long, which could be a danger. But anyway, Sue's my greatest critic, and she'll, as they are, Blair, and she'll pull me up if I run off track. I wanted to wear two hats today. I wanted to talk about the Tipperary group of stations as the general manager of the group, and then I wanted to speak a little bit about my role as the president of the NTCA. And some of you may well think, what have we got this fellow up here to talk about? Well, Tipperary group of stations gave me and a whole lot of other people lessons, and I think that there may be some benefit in those lessons for you as cattlemen. Because the Droughtmaster Society, in my opinion, is populated largely by cattlemen. That might be a strange thing to say. I was a livestock agent for nearly 20 years, and not all breed societies are populated by cattlemen. So I'm trying to pay you a compliment. So let's get on with this. Who or what is Tipperary Station? Well, everybody that you speak to in the top end has worked there. They all have an opinion about it. Not all the opinions are good. So let me talk to you about Tipperary. And the reason I thought, well, my name's left off the agenda, I'll talk about Tipperary, is there's some lessons in here, I think, of greater value to all of us. Anyway, Tipperary is an iconic Northern Territory station. It was first settled in 1914 by William James Byrne. It rose to prominence, of course, upon its purchase by the American-owned Tipperary Land Company, which was Texas money, that came over, managed by Sir William Gunn's organisation, managed the money, and the Tipperary Land Company cleared all the country in the late 1960s, and crops like sorghum and corn were growing. After that, there was a great fattening enterprise for the wild pigs, and all the birds and cockatoos and bloody mango ducks that I call them, those magpie geese. So they all got fat on the crops. The property then got sold to Sir Frederick Sutton after they pushed an awful lot of sorghum into the ocean. So there's a lesson here. In the Northern Territory, people like to do things. You get a lot of rain, anything will grow, but it's a long way to market in the Northern Territory. And what these Tipperary Land Company fellows forgot to do was to find their end market. Now, we've just heard from these two fellows that spend their whole time, their whole life, every day, living in their end market. In the Northern Territory, you have to know what you're going to do with the product that you make before you make it. Now, I think that could ring true in a lot of places, but it's certainly true in the Northern Territory. So these fellas grew a poultice of sorghum, massive tonnage of sorghum on Tipperary with all the rain that we get up there, and the fair soils. They're not good soils, but they're fair soils. And they put it on the wharf. They didn't know where they're going to sell it to, so it sat on the wharf. They got early rain, it spoilt, and they pushed it with bulldozers into the ocean. The fish ate it. So then the business got sold to Sir Frederick Sutton, who was famous for having car yards. Warren Anderson purchased the land from Sutton in about 1985 for $16 million, and he developed it into an animal sanctuary and built the amazing infrastructure that's at Tipperary that we see there today. It was purchased by prominent barrister Alan J. Myers, ACQC, in 2003. He's my boss. He's the boss of the board and the owner of the property. When I came to the business in February 2015, it had just come off a lease to AA Company. And AA Co had adjusted the property for about 4 or 5 years. You can't sublease a lease. The country is perpetual pastoral lease, and you can't sublease a lease in the Northern Territory without minister's approval. So the easy way to do it is adjust the country. But in essence, AA Company leased the country. They bought all the people, they bought all the plant and equipment, they bought the machinery, they bought all the cattle. So when I went to the business in February 2015, it was destocked of livestock, destocked of people, plant and equipment. I was the new entity's first employer or first employee. So Alan Myers continued in his ownership. He took the lease back. I told him that I'd give him 3 months at Tipperary Station, and we're coming up 8 years now of that 3 months contract. So that's Tipperary in a nutshell. There's some pictures there of rhinoceroses and Warren Anderson and some of this amazing infrastructure at Tipperary. The group currently consists of Tipperary Station, Litchfield Station, Douglas West Station. It's about 4,000 square kilometres or 1.2 million acres. It's a big aggregation of land, but it used to be a lot bigger. It used to be Tipperary, Litchfield, all of Douglas Station, Elizabeth Downs, Fish River, Murrinjoy, Buchanan and Callala stations, and that was the group that Alan Myers bought, and about 150,000 head of cattle. There's a little map there of where it is. You can see Tipperary. We're south of Adelaide River. We're only about 200 kilometres south of Darwin. I tell people with the tongue-in-cheek often that I work on a remote cattle station, but it takes me about as long to get to Darwin as it takes Mick to get down to his local coffee shop. So there's the goals and strategies that I put into the business when I went there, because I was the only person. So I thought, well, what are we going to do here? I've got a certain reputation in the business, and I want to maintain my reputation. So let's develop the agriculture on the business. You could easily ask a question, well, your goals should have been your boss's goals. Well, my boss employed me to build the station, and gave me the budget and the autonomy and the authority to do so. I've got the authority to make a mistake. And in management, when you have people working for you, I think you have to give them the authority to make a mistake. If you want to run an autonomous business, if you want your people to be autonomous, if you want to be a true manager and manage people and let them manage their business, you have to let people make a mistake. You don't want them to make a mistake. You can still yell at them for making a mistake, but you have to allow them the freedom to make a mistake. That's the point I'm making. That's tough when you're a manager. It's tough to manage people knowing that they're not doing it quite the right way. Anyway, so we decided to develop agriculture, and we wanted diversification, and we wanted sustainability, and we wanted profitability. The theme of my talk, the theme of the talks I do around the place is diversification. The theme for your farm must be diversification. There's a lot of talk about carbon. We have to diversify as a group of people, as a group of people that manage properties and manage grass, manage the environment and the things upon that land. We have to diversify. We must diversify, or we're going to wither on the vine and we're going to die. And there's no truer place in the Northern Territory where that's true. Our doors could be shut tomorrow on live export, and I'll talk to marketing shortly. This is a quick map of the Tipperary group of stations. You see how Litchfield Station and Tipperary, and over on the far right-hand side, as you're looking at the map, is a bit of Douglas West that's now left off the total of Douglas Station. Tipperary Station is the hub of where we do our breeding of our livestock, weaning of our cattle, and all our diversified activities that I'll talk about. Actually, there's a picture of Sue there on a black horse in the middle. It probably cost me probably didn't cost me a lot of money, that one. No, thank goodness. This is Litchfield Station, carrying capacity of about 18,000 head of cattle. It's a floodplain property. About a third of it is floodplain. You hear about Litchfield National Park. That was formed by taking a third of Litchfield Station and a third of LaBelle Station, which is north of Litchfield, off the landowners and turning it into a national park, which is the best thing they could have done, so the landowners didn't have to run that rough country. So frontage to the Daly River floodplain, unbelievably pristine environment that we run cattle on and protect and look after that environment. Environment will become a bit of a theme for me as we go through here. And I never thought I was the greatest environmentalist, but it turns out I am. And it turns out what I do for a living is manage the environment. I've always said that I was a grass manager. So when I work for different businesses that I've worked for in my life, people say, what do you do? I say, well, I manage grass. and I run things on that grass, but I actually don't. I've learned at Tipperary that I manage the environment. And I'm not a greenie, but it turns out I might be, because I am passionate about the environment. I'm also passionate about keeping people out of our environment, because that's what I do now. I manage the environment and the things that run on them, including people and animals and how we farm that land. So it turns out I'm an environment manager. And I think if you think about it, I think that's what you cattlemen do. I don't think you're managing cattle. I think you're managing the land and what you do upon it. That's what I think you do. We have big rivers, the Daly River and the Douglas River, and we've started growing cotton on Tipperary for our sins. And boy, aren't I copping it, because I've destroyed this river here apparently, this Daly River, and we reckon the Douglas River for all the water we're pumping out of them to grow our cotton. I'll talk about that in a moment. When I went to Tipperary, there were some pasture development permits in place, and we re-cleared. The Northern Territory doesn't recognise regrowth, so we re-cleared under these vegetation permits. They're not tree clearing permits, they're vegetation. You can't plough the land in the Northern Territory. You can't use a plough just to plough the grass out, because that's vegetation, and you have to get a vegetation clearing permit. It's not our land, it's a perpetual pastoral lease, which really should be good enough as freehold, because you own the land in perpetuity. But the government can take it off you if you do something. It's never been done, and I doubt it ever would be done, but that's the threat if you don't look after it. So we put big bulldozers into it, 4D10s, and we re-cleared the land of regrowth. It had already been cleared. I didn't clear any new land. We just re-cleared the rampant regrowth. I don't know if that slide is not really showing it. That's the height of the regrowth against that bulldozer that we put these big cutter bars into. They weren't blade ploughs, they were cutter bars running on the ripper box, and we planted pastures behind it. Because I'm a big pasture man, and there's a fellow in the room here that was essential in helping me with this, and he'll speak to you shortly. So there's some of the pastures that we grew. I just noticed, looking back on this, how much weight I've put on since then. And so I'm going to have to take that photo out of this. Any future presentation, I can assure you. It's the difference between doing the work now and overseeing the work. If you get a choice, keep doing the work. You be careful, Mick. This is what can happen for you working in the head office. So diversification. This is what Tipperary now does from me turning up there in February 2015. We're in livestock production. We run a licensed quarantine premises, which people call a live export yard. They're actually, I think they're called a licensed premises to AQUIS. We do broadacre farming. We're building a cotton gin. My partner Sue is the, she's looking at me. Sue's the project supervisor for building a cotton gin, where we do horticulture. We run a carbon abatement program. We do some tourism, and we look after the environment. Livestock, our current carrying capacity is about 55,000 head. We're not running that at the moment because, as I said, I was a livestock agent for nearly 20 years. I like selling cattle. So when the market went very high, I sold. But when you sell, you have to buy back, and it's been difficult to buy back. So we're breeding our way back, but this market will turn around. It always has. Can you remember in your lives, Rob, you've seen it go up here and we've seen it go down there, and it'll do it again. We run about 10,000 breeding females because, maybe contrary to popular belief, Tipperary is not a very good female breeding property or breeding female property. It backgrounds cattle very, very nicely, and so we run a balance of weaners and backgrounders. We normally buy about 25 to 30,000 head of cattle, and we background them on the properties and end up pushing them through a bit of a system onto the floodplain and bring them out, and they go to live export. So we do breeding, backgrounding, live export, and in our quarantine facility. It's quite. I love backgrounding. It's one of my great passions. I love taking light cattle and putting them through a system, paddocking them up into their weight ranges, and marketing them. I love that. I want to talk about our livestock markets. When you talk about livestock markets, it has to be a lot of things when you're marketing livestock, but the main thing you have to do is it's got to be profitable. And freight costs in the Northern Territory are a killer. So I wrote down all the markets that are profitable to our geographical position in the Northern Territory, and there they are. because it's live export. Because by the time you put cattle on a truck and truck them to somewhere with the resultant loss of yield and weight loss, and the freight cost and the diesel cost, and diesel's costing so much, there's no profit in it, except that there has been over the last 18 months because the price has been so high. And you may have read where journalists have made a thing about me selling cattle down in the south. It was a thing, because apparently sending cattle to Roma to achieve the highest price that I could achieve for those particular type of cattle on the day was quite a, negligent or some other word thing to do for some of our members in the NTCA. Because when you run a member organisation, you're beholden to the members, and they told me that as the NTCA president, I shouldn't have been sending cattle out of the Northern Territory. It's disloyal. Of course, my loyalty must be to the bloke that pays my paycheck. He wasn't interested in, in that particular case about my presidency of the NTCA. He was interested in making sure that we were running a business that was profitable so I could continue to pay all the employees that we employ and send their kids to school and live on the station. But I got that. And we also get beaten up about being in live export. Now, I don't particularly have more love for live export than some other marketing way, but this is the only way we can make a profit. So when the activists say to us, or say to me particularly, you're just into live export for the money, I say that's right. What do you do for money? Oh, I work in a shoe store. You bastard! We all have to do something to be profitable, but we should be proud of, as cattlemen in our chosen profession of running this land, that we can be proud of. And I'm proud of the systems that live export have got in place. I'm proud that live export has the system has less mortality than the 3% mortality I get on Tipperary every year. Cows die, people die, dogs die, crocodiles eat our cattle, dingoes get them, they die of old age, snake bite when you can't work out what anything else happened. Cattle die, but they don't seem to die on live export boats to the same percentage as what they die on our land. That's the fact. But who wants to listen to that? It's not a headline, is it? Anyway, we sell to live export because that's profitable. So when Simon said to me, David, perhaps you should talk about your markets in the Northern Territory, I've done that. Now, there are other markets. Mick runs a lot of country in the Northern Territory. I've been speaking to his managers the other day because Sue talked me into going down to Harts Range down near Alice Springs where it was minus 1.6 for 3 or 4 days. There's a top ender. We're very long on warmth. We don't like the cold, and we really feel the cold, and crikey, it was cold. Anyway, I talked to Mick's Amber Linden manager and his Anari Tuma manager, who's also a top ender that's just gone down there. And there's other markets, but they're not the top end of the Northern Territory. The only market we got is live export. Got closed in 2011. All of us are going to have to pay for that. I don't think it's fair that the taxpayer should have to pay for a decision that government's made. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be millions of dollars. I don't think it's fair. I'm part of that case in giving advice and help as NTCA president because we ran it. We beat up the government and won. But the outcome's not fair. It's the only outcome that had to happen, but it's not a fair outcome. Okay, now look what I've done. I went and bought some Droughtmasters. We're long on Brahmins in the top end of the Northern Territory, and I've been long on Brahmins for a long time. I don't particularly think they're any better than anything else, but they will live in our country. But I bought 800 Droughtmaster breeding females from Lorraine Station, north of Cloncurry, when I was starting to build the herd back on Tipperary. These Droughtmaster cows on Tipperary, every year they calve. Every year they get fat. We hit our protein drought about August. About now we start getting a protein drought. Every year in the top end we get a flood and we get a drought. So we're not real sympathetic of people who get flooded or get droughted. We have it every bloody year. And we get a protein drought and our cows will die if we don't look after them. But every year these Droughtmaster cows get fat and every year they survive. They get poor, but then they come back. The top end of the Northern Territory is prone to biting insects, buffalo fly. Look, if there's a bloody pestilence, we get it. We get a protein drought, and it's a very difficult environment for cows to survive in. But what struck me is I put these cows into one of my better paddocks, and I could see them because I was driving past them all the time, because I'm less and less being involved with their livestock because I'm being pulled more and more away to do a helicopter management of the business. I mean, they hired me to be the general manager, not the head stockman, which is what I actually like. Anyway, so these cows survive and they have calves every day, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be good to buy some cattle and have a breed that's a bit more fertile than these Brahman cattle, and actually have cattle that put on more weight for age? So when we went down to Harts Range the other day, we were drafting. Well, Sue was drafting. I don't do it. I'm not that mad. So giving all that away. And Sue was drafting Mount Riddick Pole Hereford weaners. They were heavier than our finished cattle. Now, I was saying it, I was commentating down there at the draft, and I was saying, look at these Mount Riddick weaners. They were 400 kilos. We sell cattle at 350 kilos and think we're doing well. So, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got, right? And you can't run Droughtmaster cattle on Tipperary. You can't grow cotton on Tipperary. You can't do this on Tipperary, and you can't do that on Tipperary. Well, we're bloody well doing it. So I thought, well, I'll go and buy these bulls and see how they're going. Now, I don't think Simon knew that I'd bought Droughtmaster bulls. I don't think that's why I got the invitation here. But I can assure you I'm getting phone calls from your bull-selling members. Do you want to buy some more of these buggers, David? Well, just let me work out how these go. I need to ascertain whether they have an ability to handle our heat. It gets very humid as well in Northern Territory, or where we are. We have a lot of biting insects. It's a tough climate. It's a tough environment, and we have a protein drought every year. So can the larger run of our cattle, can Droughtmasters handle those conditions? Now, maybe I didn't need to go and buy these bulls and try and find it out myself. You should have been able to tell me that. Now, your society, you have an opportunity here to say, you top enders, you say that these cattle won't grow up there. We think they will. Now, do you think they will? Do I need to be testing? I'm asking the question. Do I need to be testing these cattle, or should I just be doing it? You tell me. Are they going to handle these conditions? It's pretty tough up there. I mean, look at me. We're just entering a protein drought stage. Anyway, they're good cattle. It was great to buy cattle. They didn't have a great big hump on them, and beautiful temperament. So we'll see how we go. There's only 10 of them. I've put them into a really good line of grey Brahman cows, and we'll see what happens. But I'm now a Droughtmaster breeder. How about that? Yeah. Fantastic. Honeymoon Export Yard. We have a licensed export premises, number 179. Licensed to supply Indonesia. It's a license for 15,000 head. It's one of the biggest licenses in the Northern Territory. We have a real competitive advantage over smaller facilities due to surrounding paddocks, because we can put our cattle in and out of the paddocks and through that system. But one of the our competitors, not that we see them as a competitor, but one of the other export yards decided to expand and increase his licence, and he's on the Bitumen Road. We got a bit of dirt into our place, and I think this yard here is starting to find that it's going to struggle to be an export yard. Anyway, it's our cattle yard. We just got it licensed. We use it as our cattle yard. Then we decided to do some broadacre farming, irrigated and dryland. We do fodder production, so that's corn silage that we feed to our weaners. We mostly try and do one round of mustering, early wean, take everything 80 kilos and above, jam them in that, see that little yard at the back there, and feed them corn silage and things and get their weight going. Put people around them on horseback and teach them some manners. We did some irrigation development. We've put some pivots in, and we do some dryland cotton production. We started off with about 50 hectares under pivots. The story about why we did cotton is, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. I was driving along beside the export yard, and where AA Company had fed some cottonseed to their cattle, some whole cottonseed that they trucked up there at great expense, a cotton plant was growing, and he was a withered up, sick-looking little fellow. And I'd asked my brother, who was long on farming, he was a ringer and then turned over to driving tractors, and I asked him to come up and help me start up the farming on Tipperary, which he did. And we were driving along together, and I said to Bruce, I said, "What's that plant there?" And he said, "Well, you know what it is, it's cotton." And I said, "Well, if it can grow there in the road, why wouldn't it be able to grow in the paddocks?" And he said, well, the only reason is you haven't given me a paddock to grow it. And I said, well, go and grow it. And so I got interviewed the other day by Kerry Lonergan. He said, boy, it must have been a long strategic process to come up with, wanting to grow cotton. Well, it wasn't, because I didn't think it through very well. Because I wanted the cotton seed. I said, well, you go and grow it. There's a horse paddock. It's called horse paddock because that's where you run the horses. Horses, you're out, cotton in there, because I want the cotton seed, because I have had a lot of experience feeding cotton seed to cattle. I could tell you a long and boring story about that, but I have, and it's great stuff. It's one of the great, I think, advantages that the cattlemen in the Northern Territory are staring in the face of to be able to use this. Anyway, I hadn't thought it through. I wanted to grow the stuff and get the cotton seed and feed the cattle, but of course you can't just pull the seed out of the cotton. You've got to send it off somewhere to get processed. Well, they've outlawed the way that I was thinking about doing it, given that we've had quite a few communities around us. So I've got to send it south to do it, and I didn't think about the freight coming back. Anyhow, we're getting the cotton seed back, and it turned out quickly that it grew. And I was talking about sucking all the water out of the rivers earlier. Well, we actually don't. It's dry land cotton. We don't irrigate it, and I've had a procession of ministers coming out there to have a look at the cotton that we're growing, and I always ask them to show me to have a look at the irrigator, and they always look for it, and they always tell me they can't find it, of course, and I say you got to look up there. We grow dry land cotton. For Christ's sake, it's grown by the rain. Uses very little chemical. Has a 3 gene in it these days to stop insects. We don't have to spray it. There's not enough cotton grown in the Northern Territory to have cotton-eating insects up there anyway. So it's been fantastically sustainable for us because it's helped us thwart a grass called gamba grass, which is actually a pretty good cattle feed early in the season, but then becomes a great fire risk in the protein drought. And so we've been able to manage this gamba grass by using Roundup to spray that grass out and plant this cotton straight into it. It became very obvious to us that we can't grow cotton without a processing facility because of freight. So we're starting to build a cotton gin, and that should be finished for commercial use in about July. It's not just for us; it's for all the growers up there, who are largely cattlemen that grew fodder crops for their cattle that are swapping over from fodder crops to cotton. We also do some horticulture, so we grow citrus trees and mangoes. Our citrus trees are lemons. We grow 10,738 Eureka lemons. That's how many that's left. We've had two die. So cattle die, dogs die, lemons die. But we're left with 10,738 of them. And next year, we're trying to get them to flower now. And next year, we should have our first little harvest of stage 1. We're pretty proud of our lemon trees. We also got told that couldn't be done. We'll see. They're growing. We'll see if they're profitable. We're great users of technology. We do the solar power with bores and things. We've got an internet of things on between the stations. We do weed identification with drones and spraying. We do water monitoring. We have weather stations, moisture probes, and irrigation and fertigation and vehicle tracking and walkover weighing. You name it, we're doing it if it works for us. We're not doing it just for the sake of doing it. We've got monitors on our tanks. Our bore runner pulls out his iPad and has a look at what all the tanks are doing and what the flow meters are doing. And it doesn't stop us having a bore runner, but it tells him where to go each day. He'll go to the one where there may be trouble or not. And the same with all these other things. They've just been able to help us. Bruce can turn on his irrigators where we now irrigate hay. He can turn on his irrigators with his phone, so he can do it at home. He doesn't have to go out at 3 o'clock in the morning and turn them off or on. He just does it with his phone. So technology has been fantastic for us, and I'm sure it's fantastic in smaller holdings. But look, Mount Riddick, Steve Cadzo was telling me the other day, and you'd know this, John, Mount Riddick's been using water monitoring for 17 years. Out in that country, and they do it all through a satellite. I'm sure Mick knows all about that out in that country. Fire's a big deal on Tipperary. When I first went there, I was of the belief that Tipperary was an old Aboriginal word for place of much fire. We have got this gamba grass on it. It burns 14 times hotter than the native pastures. The fires are something to behold. But we do a carbon abatement program, and our program is an early one. And there's a lot of programs with carbon. And there's a lot of potholes in dealing with what program might be best for you. This one was in place and not being used, and we kick-started it and got it going again. Our carbon abatement program is that we burn early, so we do cold fires as opposed to hot fires. And if we've burnt before before the 1st of August, then we get the difference between what a hot fire would burn and leave the country black and devastated and all the lizards frizzled, and doing a cold fire. So there's a scientific methodology that says if you do a late fire, this much will burn. If you do a cold fire, this much will burn. And the difference between this much and that much is claimable, and that's what we claim. Early methodology, pretty simple. Do early burning, do early management burns. So my challenges on the station are the same as your challenges. They're people, they're the environment we work in, they're government, because the Northern Territory government's quite an invasive government, if that's a word or if that's a term. They have a lot to say in what we do. They don't know what we do, mind you, and what they say doesn't make much sense, but they have a lot of say in what we do. And our market is a challenge. So people, station staff, very important to us because of our fantastic station facilities that we have, swimming pools and sports facilities. We don't really have that much trouble attracting people, although I have found the last 2 years we're having trouble attracting skilled people. So training programs for us are very important. Environment, we lock up country and look after the animals on it. We keep invasive species out of those environmental areas. Wildlife and conservation's a very important aspect of our business to look after our land and our pristine environment, because it is a beautiful, pristine environment that we operate in. Government I could talk all day about, but I wanted to finish up talking about Tipperary and put my other hat on and talk to you something about the NTCA in the last 5 minutes. So, wearing my other hat, let me talk to you about the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association and what's taking up our time at the moment. So, what's taking up my time as president of this very competent association. It's competent because of its members. We're a single, unlike AgForce and others, we're a single entity. Our focus is on looking after the cattlemen of the Northern Territory, and so we're a single commodity focus. My focus at the moment is on biosecurity and exotic disease, this FMD and LSD outbreak that's close to our shores. And I say that our best defence is Indonesia's offence. There's been some calls for borders to be closed. We don't support that. And I've said this in the press, and I'm saying it here again today and anywhere else if anybody wants to listen. Our largest live cattle trading partner and the 4th largest box beef partner that we trade with is Indonesia. We don't advocate border closure. If we did, for how long? If we close the borders, how long should we close them for? Until foot and mouth leaves Indonesia? Well, it won't. It won't leave Indonesia. It's there now. That's where it is. So does the border need to remain closed forever? Or will it open at some stage on some sort of negative test from vaccine or something? Well, they're not going to do that. The Indonesians aren't going to do that. They're too disparate in their management methods to do that. This is a big customer. Last time we closed the borders to our customer with live export cattle, it cost the government some millions, or us taxpayers, it's cost us millions and millions and millions of dollars. We don't advocate closing the borders. We advocate getting over there and doing the work over there, and that's what we've been heavily invested as. That's what we see ourselves as the frontline association looking after our cattlemen in the top end. John wanted me to talk about financial preparedness. I think there's a disparity between government departments and ministerial degree. So the Minister for Agriculture, he says, we're going to do this, and I've ordered for this to happen. Now, I agree, that's fine. He does do that. He's definitely doing that, and he's definitely working hard, and he's definitely trying for that. But the government departments aren't doing it. So we're going to put in footbaths. Did any of you walk through a footbath at an airport? Did you see a footbath at an airport? Well, in the Northern Territory there is, because of the Northern Territory government itself, with us hitting them with the jigger, they've done it, and they're doing a good job with it. Footbaths won't kill foot and mouth disease, right? You've got to stand in that citric acid for 15 minutes. If you've got a little foot and mouth on your shoe, you've got to stand in that stuff for 15 minutes before it'll kill that virus. So footbaths aren't the answer, but they're very you can see them, can't you? You can see it. People that come off a plane, they walk through a footpath and they go, oh, we're doing our bit. And it's just a good news story. So we went for footbaths very quickly. But you know what? Foot and Mouth's been knocking on our shore, knocking on our door, walking in our door into Australia for 30 years that I know of. The chief vet in the Northern Territory, who's a very capable woman and brilliant, it's great that we have her there, she told me that, yep, 30 years Foot and Mouth's been coming into Australia and our systems pick it up, we detect it, we pick it up, we dispose of the bad goods and nothing's ever said about it. Until this minister did say something about it and scared the crap out of all of us. But he shouldn't have. And I did speak to him about that. I said to him, I'm not sure if you're naive or stupid or both. Which is it? And he said, maybe I was a bit naive, but I needed to get the story out. And I said, you don't need to get the story out. You don't need to talk about it. Just do your job. Just let your department do their job. Because the quarantine department, our border force, is doing a good job with this. I'm less worried about foot and mouth disease than I am lumpy skin, because we have control measures in place for foot and mouth disease, but lumpy skin can fly in. And we had fall armyworm coming 2 years ago. It just flew in. The bloody thing, right? You can't stop that coming in, but you have to have measures in place to do it. So the financial preparedness, I think, John, that the government is prepared. They have fantastic plans through AusVet plan to handle an incursion of foot and mouth in Australia. Our problem was the plans were so good for incursion in Australia, they were forgetting that they've got to prevent it coming in here. You know, to win a game of football, you've got to be a very good defensive side. You've got to score more points than your opponent, but you can only do that if you keep your opponent out from the line. And it's like that with foot and mouth. So we're decreeing very strongly, and we get good traction, that you need to be over in Indonesia doing the job over there to stop it coming into here. And that's the key. I'd say something about the NLIS system. Now, I'll only talk about the NLIS system in the Northern Territory. I think Blair said, you know, our NLIS system is, our traceability systems are good. Well, in the Territory, they're not. The NLIS system in the Territory, I think because of some of the cowboy attitudes of some of our members, not good enough. And we don't use an NVD in the Northern Territory. We're not decreed to. We don't have to. It's a national vendor declaration that's not used nationally. So I've been advocating for a long time, and like growing cotton and being a live exporter, I get rocks thrown at me for it. But we need to use an NVD, for goodness sake. We're in the cattle business. We're in the food business. This started with John Keir years ago when I was a boy in Dalgetty's. Anyway, we're working hard with the government vet to have NVD. The only NVD reason that you have in the Northern Territory is if you're LPA accredited, and most cattlemen aren't up there. John, I'm starting to close. Number 2 is Indigenous issues. We're long on Indigenous issues in the Northern Territory, but in Australia they're coming over the hill at you, and you people with freehold country don't think you're safe either. There's now talk about a treaty and a voice to Parliament. Now, details are vital and they need to be broadly shared. A referendum on a wokely worded, warm, fuzzy question won't cut it. We need details around this. I could formulate a question that says, do you think everybody should be treated equally in a referendum? Well, of course we should, tick. That's not the issue, is it? So, improving the lot of Indigenous Australians is everyone's priority, but more bureaucracy in Canberra won't close the gap in a place like Wadeye or other communities. In Wadeye, there's 500 people displaced and they've all moved into Darwin. And the fight's moved from Wadeye, it's moved into Darwin. And those fellas are bluing now in Darwin. Increasing a group of people's political power is not the same thing as empowering a group of people. These things must be linked together in policy and practice if Australians are to make a real difference. So beware this voice to Parliament. Beware that the Indigenous Australians in Parliament at the moment are telling us it's not going to be a big help. That's what they're telling us. Can you remember years ago, you old fellas remember this? Gough Whitlam flew to the Northern Territory and he picked up the land and he poured the soil into Vincent Lingari's hand. And he said, we're going to look after you. Now, Gough Whitlam I don't think he was a bad person. I don't think he was he couldn't foresee the trouble that he was going to cause to the cattlemen and the landowners and the people of Australia. It's easy to give away things you don't own to people you don't know so you can keep another group of people happy. What Gough Whitlam did in trying to do the right thing for Aboriginal people caused a huge displacement. The cattle stations then couldn't afford to feed all the family. It's not just the worker, you have the whole family on the station, and it displaced. It was a great displacement of Indigenous peoples off the land that they wanted to live on, and they went into communities. That's where the trouble started. So I don't think Anthony Albanese in his government, I don't think he really understands the issue. That's what I would say. And it's a big issue for all of us, because as I said, having one group of Australians, which are, titled Indigenous Australians, in a situation that's different to other Australians is not equitable. So we have to take the time to consider these acts, and we can end up inflicting more harm than good by not understanding. The last thing I'd say is I've been spending a lot of time on Cattle Council and this new entity called Cattle Australia. Sometimes, like my friend Mick over there, we shake our head and we think, goodness, why am I doing this? NTCA had an opinion that, bugger Cattle Council, it's broken, we don't want anything to do with it, we're leaving. And I thought, as president of the NTCA, I couldn't let that happen on my watch. There'll be another thing that I'm responsible for that's no good. So we better engage. And the NTCA has really engaged on this Cattle Australia deal. We must have a peak body for the grass-fed industry. At the moment, we have RMAC and NFF trying to talk about exotic diseases coming into Australia that can affect the grass-fed industry. That's not their job. They're not advocates. Old Cattle Council or Cattle Australia, that's their job. So I've spent an awful lot of time with NTCA trying to get this Cattle Australia thing over the line. And I will say to you that it won't be perfect. A number of our peak bodies aren't perfect. NTCA is not perfect, and people aren't perfect, and organisations aren't perfect. And Cattle Australia will not be perfect. But in 2 years' time, we'll have the opportunity to refocus, re-strategise what works, what's not working, and fix it. So what I do say to you is I urge you to be a part of this business, even though at the back of your mind you're going, oh, geez, because we do need, as cattle producers, a peak body for the grass-fed industry with a strong voice, well-funded, and with elected members. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Passionate and entertaining as always. So I think we'll leave questions because we are running a little behind time, but you can catch up with David a little later. A free plug. His podcast with Kerry Lonergan on the Weekly Grill platform on Beef Central will be published this afternoon, so you can see a extended version of what he had to say today through the audio channel this afternoon. So our next speaker is Duncan Brown, and Duncan and I go back a long way. We're work colleagues together many years ago. And Duncan, his family has bred Droughtmaster cattle for many years in previous times, but he has forged a unique business in the Brisbane Valley, a protein business, but outside of the beef space. And I think it's really important to be able to look at what others in the protein space are doing, their approach to the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. So, Duncan, would you like to join us up here and give us a bit of insight into what's going on in your business? Thank you.
Going to turn me up in a bit, which probably isn't necessary. Can everyone hear me okay while that happens? Thank you. Well, very entertaining speaker. Thank you, David. Really appreciate that. And I think I've got 2 minutes now, which is excellent. So I could reflect on my feed conversion performance too. I actually took a picture out earlier, but that's all right. Great to be here. And look, I very much feel like a minnow in a pond of gropers, to put it delicately. I'm very much a small player in the beef scene, but a passionate Droughtmaster breeder. As I said, my family bred Droughtmasters up in the Brisbane area for quite a while, and we're now very privileged to have Charlie Hawkins and family looking after managing a herd up in the Barkly Forest, which is great. We also background cattle down in the Brisbane Valley, but I will keep moving. So Brisbane Valley Protein, what are we? Probably that little map there sums it up. That's a property map. That's 3,000 acres, sort of butting up against the Tyson Abattoir. You can see there in the northwest corner. And Green Mountain, really just sandy, loamy, unproductive country. And in 2016, with the help of South African investors, we purchased that and proceeded to turn. There was just one chicken farm there, which you can see down in the bottom corner. And we recognised the opportunity for protein exports into Asia. We also recognised how challenging it was to get approvals for any sort of high-intensity livestock or processing or production in that area. So in a sense, we sought to future-proof it by setting out to, develop Australia's first dedicated protein precinct. We have IT precincts, we have industry precincts, but a precinct where all things protein could happen. So that started a long conversation with Council, Somerset Council and the state government, and who insisted that we were fairly diversified, that we covered everything from training to food tourism to processing to intensive livestock. And that is the culmination. In 2018, we exercised a thing called the Section 242 of the Land Act, and that is now enshrined as a dedicated food production precinct. It includes things like enough poultry farms there to supply a 200,000 bird a week abattoir. We have both an approval for a 2,000 head a day beef abattoir, much bigger than obviously we're going to need, or a 600,000 bird a week poultry abattoir. The either or was important. The reason for the scale was Council insisted, you can imagine all of this had to go to public notification. Council insisted that the biggest possible scenarios were modelled, and if we do one day develop a beef abattoir, as long as it's within that footprint, it becomes a code accessible application. So in a sense, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been trying to bring this to life. The brands that we've developed, obviously Brisbane Valley Protein. I went to a lot of cattle sales, and Dickie Boyd at Toogoolawah teased me, thought I was in the gym industry until he looked at me. But obviously protein is very meaningful in Asia, and that's very much where I guess we've had our focus. Brisbane Valley Quail I'll speak about in a minute, and as a result of COVID, we quite in 2020, as we had to shut down our little poultry processing plant, we, in order to utilise that, we started a direct-to-consumer business called Brisbane Valley Farm Direct, and today we're delivering directly to about 250 families in southeast Queensland. Just one of the little opportunities that came out of all the stress of COVID. And so Brisbane Valley Quail, you might think, what are we talking about quail here? John Cotter at the Glenland sale pointed out to me that you'll need about 800 quail for one Japox bullock. I told him that we can finish our quail from woe to go in 33 days. He was impressed with that. But why quail? So part of the precinct was we trademarked the name Brisbane Valley, in a sense, I guess a bit of a future initiative to create a food regional brand. And we needed a protein. We needed a protein that was integrated, that we could control from hatch to dispatch. I don't know about you, but I've always been a fan of quail, although they can be a little bit diminutive. If you go down to Chinatown, you go to the Enjoy Inn, you know, they're good as toothpicks. But always liked them and realised, you know, you could probably set up an integrated quail setup for around 1.5 million and start exporting. And so I was in Sydney one day and happened to drop in on a restaurant called Fire Door. A guy put a quail, what he said was a quail in front of me. I debated and said that's too big to be a quail. He was right. 2 years later, I bought the genetics to those quail, and we now own the exclusive production of the world's biggest quail, which normal quail is 180 grams. Ours get to about 400 grams, even 500 grams now in about 33 days. So genetics is a valuable thing. And even though a lot of Australians are now awakening to the virtues of quail, it is a bit of a global essential in lots of parts. So I thought I'd just share briefly what are some of the lessons that can apply because we are also in the space. We've been in discussions with the Droughtmaster Society about a potential Droughtmaster brand, and certainly Droughtmaster beef is proving a hit through our catering and through our online service. Some of the lessons I guess I've learned about creating an integrated business is, well, with the quail, firstly, the big advantage is you're dealing with one bird. When you sell a quail, you sell the whole product, you know. And obviously the challenge with beef is what to do with the secondaries. We all know that. It's easy to sell the primals. Secondly, quail is utterly consistent. Every time you have a feed of our quail, and we're in about 30 restaurants here in Brisbane, it is absolutely the same experience every time, and chefs love that. It's absolutely unique. So when I have been spending a lot of time in Hong Kong, Korea, and Singapore, and the beauty is there is only one 350 to 400 gram quail in the world. What I've noticed is when you go, some of you may have been to cold storage centres in Asia, and you will see literally hundreds of beef brands lined up. So having that unique virtue is very good. One thing I've learned is just the importance of chefs. I think for a lot of the bigger players, they deal through wholesalers and distributors. But I tell you what, chefs are your quickest point of market research and feedback, and chefs love farmers. A chef won't often offer a wholesaler a free feed, but as soon as they know you're a farmer, they want to talk to you. They are a really important part of our business and a great source of feedback. Chefs are also very much the celebrities and the influencers in the food chain today. In fact, there's a massive shortage of chefs in Brisbane at the moment. I heard of a young chef getting offered $200,000 to shift restaurants the other day. So chefs are the influencers, and restaurant owners are desperate to get them on board. So if we can get in front of the chefs, that helps, and that's certainly what I've found. I learned very early on in the piece how to sneak past the front of house and take a chilled quail and plonk it on the bench of a chef and watch the impact from there. Finding a good distributor obviously has been very important, particularly in Asia. Did about 8 trips to Singapore before we found the Hubert's group, and they really were right for us. They weren't too big, they weren't too small. They stuck by us in COVID. So just the importance of relationship in that area is absolutely critical. Price still talks the loudest. I can remember trying to get an RSPCA free-range chicken into Hong Kong, and they all lauded our clean and green virtues. And eventually I sent over a trial shipment, and she still called me back and said we were $2 a kilogram more expensive than the Malaysian equivalent. Even though our whole time there they told us how they didn't want to touch the Malaysian products. Price still speaks incredibly loud, and you need to be prepared to play the long game. We're 5 years in, and I think we're about to make our first profit. So I've spent a lot of time in not-for-profits, and I feel like I'm still there sometimes. But so what do the chefs want? What are they saying? And I've got a few of the local rock stars here. This is Will Cowper, who's down at Otto, if you're keen for a good feed. Otto down at South Bank. And these guys are, they love meat. They really enjoy their interactions with farmers. So what are chefs looking for? And this was just speaking to Will yesterday. Absolute consistency. There's no room for error when you're paying $70 for a steak. Good fat to meat ratio. Must be suitable for a hot charcoal grill. Most of these guys have those flash Josper type things that can cook a steak at up to 500 degrees in about 2 minutes. What he's currently using, he actually has Ranges Valley producing a bespoke product, an exclusive marble score 7 Angus, which he gets directly through Top Cuts. So the story is important to these guys, but at the end of the day, it's got to deliver. Javier Cadena at Motor, another great eating experience if you're looking for a feed this week. He says, we are seeing a drift away from heavy grain fed. People prefer that grass-fed flavour. Marbling is a bonus, but it has to be consistently tender and juicy with real flavour. And what he's using at the moment is John D. Angus Tomahawks, Marble Score 2, and Black Onyx T-bone steak. And he's also using, has anyone heard of the vintage beef brand that's out, which is really cast for aged Tasmanian cows, but they're selling it for a fortune. So this guy's a real rock star. He was on the Netflix series The Final Table and won. He was the first Michelin restaurant to take our product. And again, I snuck in there just before lunch service one day. Literally had the front of house chasing me down the hall. Snuck it in front of him. He had me for dinner that night. Shouted me to an 11-course degustation and a lot of very good wine. And he's become a champion for our product. And guess what it cost me? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. But we're now on the menu of one of the most decorated, one of the top 15 restaurants in Asia. So I'm saying, you don't need big budgets. It is about relationship. And one thing about being small and nimble, which we will be, if a Droughtmaster beef brand gets off the ground, you have that capacity. We have that relationship, good people, good stories, and you get the guys like this. You can't buy that sort of publicity. And what he says, I'm looking for flavour and a steak they can't get anywhere else. An epic eating experience. Flavoursome, juicy, consistent. And he's using Mayura Wagyu Marble Score 7+. And I've got to know Scott De Bruin down at Mayura Wagyu in South Australia. And I don't know if you've had anything to do with them, John, but they are a phenomenal integrated operation. So much we can learn from them, even though they bat in a very different league in some ways. An inspiring guy, good guy, and yeah, very clever. And then what about, we can't just target the high end of town. What about the Lowy pub? If you want to fight, that's where you need to go. And just speaking to Sarah, who I know quite well, great. They do a great job. There's nothing flash, but it's one of those rump steaks that spills over the edge. It tastes the same every time. They've got a basic grill. They can't count on the calibre of the chefs behind the grill. Could be a 17-year-old acne-riddled kid. Could be anything. But she says it all comes down to price and consistency. A good steak is as important as a cold beer in a country pub. And she uses anything tender, consistent, and large. Was her criteria. Okay, so who's performing in the brand space? And again, there are people in this room far more qualified to speak. This is from my interactions, particularly over the last 5 years, because we are small, because we are a startup, not in the farming space, we're more established and larger there, but in the retail space, we've had to do the hard yards on the ground, and these are the brands I keep butting into. So Mayura Wagyu, and it is a superb product. I mean, for me, I find some Wagyu a little bit overpowering, some Wagyu a little bit fatty. This is sublime stuff. He's got probably the most established full-blood herd in the country, if not the world. Probably got 8 of the 10 top marbling sires. He's a hell of a nice bloke. He's got my dream. My idea of utopia is he's got his own steakhouse on the feedlot, and it only does tomahawks and a small bowl of lettuce, I'm told. So. But they are, and the reason is they're very much in that exclusive space. You actually have to go on a waiting list to buy Mayura Wagyu. So obviously in a different, they're batting in a different arena to where we are. In terms of the grass-fed space, 30 degrees south, performing very well. They're a South Australian brand. John D is highly regarded, and Free Reign Meat Company. They're in that grass-fed space, which is where I think we need to, or grass-finished, pasture-finished. So what about droughty beef? What are some of the challenges and opportunities for us as we consider venturing down the branded space? Firstly, I think we have a great story. We know that, and that does count. It does get you through the door. We had a media launch at Moda for our quail, sort of to relaunch it after COVID in November last year. We had 80 chefs in the room, and Charlie Hawkins was one of my guests. And at the end of the day, I just got up, and Charlie, obviously a well-known Barclay Droughtmaster breeder, I just got Charlie to share a little bit about his cattle and his country and his family. I had 26 calls in the next week from chefs wanting to source Charlie's beef, even though I said very clearly we don't have a branded beef product. We are exploring Droughtmaster beef. So the story is very powerful. It works. And our cattle are in country that is captivating. It is pristine. Ticks all those boxes. That's good. We know the sustainability piece. I won't talk about that. We know our people. I think, we're droughty breeders. We're a humble mob. We're a practical mob. We don't have an EBV for arrogance. And so I think there's a lot to go. Where would we sit in the market? So what are our considerations moving forward? And I am moving fairly quickly because I know time's an issue. I think the big one is, look, the story will get you through the door. But as I've discovered with chefs, and on occasion our quail's been dropped, if it isn't a great, consistent eating experience, they won't come back. So we need to ask the question, what is our product? What are we aiming for? Obviously, we're not going to do a marble score 7. Can we produce that great, juicy, tender, consistent experience? What does that look like, and how does that convert to a set of specifications? I'm a big one, as we've discovered with quail, starting small and under-promising and over-delivering. I think that's essential. So starting small, and that may mean an alliance with a meat processor, doing 10 beasts a week, supplying 2 high-profile restaurants, having a good market for the secondaries, and absolutely making sure you smash that week in, week out. Because if the right restaurants are stocking you and the right chefs are behind you, you will get a name. As I said, building your brand through iconic restaurants. In Brisbane, restaurants like Harvey's with PJ, and Harvey at Moda, and Blackbird, week in, week out, that Brisbane Valley quail was on the menu, and that did wonders for our reputation, and that built our retail traction and now our direct-to-consumer traction as well. Obviously, very obvious one, you need to find an outlet for the secondaries. You'll sell the primals all day long, But you need to understand, you can ring up Melrina, the big meat wholesaler, and look, you can get good MSA grass-fed cube rolls right now for $22 a kilo. I mean, it's tough. It's competitive. This is a long-haul game if we want to go down this path. There are no quick bucks. It's much easier just selling for cattle or feedlot or selling your weaners out of the paddock. So I think it's a conscious choice. We need to count the cost. Is this a journey we want to go on? Personally, I think if there's a bunch of people brave enough to dip their toe in the water, brave enough to make some sacrifices on behalf of the breed, if the breed society is willing to get back them, I think it's worthwhile. I think it gives us another outlet. I think the origins of our cattle, some of the virtues that David spoke about, really do give us a great story. We all know Droughtmaster beef can taste great. And tomorrow, we're catering the Mount Isa Rodeo. 500 patrons will be enjoying slow-cooked Droughtmaster oyster blade, and that'll be promoted all on the menus. What I don't need is them ringing me up and saying, you know, we'd like to order 1,000 cartons next week, because we don't have that. We don't even really know what we want to produce yet. So I think really we're talking about a responsible R&D phase to understand, given our product, given our cattle, what can we produce consistently, week in, week out, find a processor to align with, wrap a bit of a grid around that, find a couple of restaurants, and I could find you 20 restaurants tomorrow who would back people like you. They really want to back people like you, but we've got to be able to give them that consistency week in, week out, and that's what I love about our little big bird. We're able to do that. And I did just in finishing, so what can the Droughtmaster Society, what's its role in that? Obviously, I'm firmly of the belief breed societies aren't really equipped to run commercial brand adventures. I think some of the best examples that I've seen, and I haven't seen the numbers behind this, but I had a good chat with one of the directors of the 1,000 Guinness Shorthorn program yesterday. I think they've got a good program. So effectively they've got an alliance with JBS. JBS obviously owns the brand. I didn't quite get to what the Shorthorn breed's stake was in that brand, but they've got a relationship. They own the brand. They source up to 4-tooth steers. They pay a premium above the market. It's got to be 75% Shorthorn, although he did say that a Shorthorn over a droughted cow would be absolutely acceptable. There you go. And so the breed's role is very much as a conduit and a guardian of the brand, and they have a commercial alliance, and they cannot get enough cattle from what I hear, and they're consistently paying a good percentage over the market. Obviously Angus had an initial foray with certified Angus beef, which again they didn't run commercially. They now focus on verification, so making sure the genetic integrity is there. So if John D comes and says, we want you to back our brand, I'm sure you'd know more about this than me, John. From what I can understand, verified Angus is a bit of a quality control mechanism. So I think the Breed Society can do something. We can establish a brand once we know what we want to do, start in a modest way, find a good running partner, tell our story, and yeah, I think some real opportunities there. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Duncan. Yeah, look, what a unique little, well, not little, but what a unique business Duncan is developing there in the Brisbane Valley, and you know, great insights there. So I've got a question. I'm fascinated in what you've done with the quail. I mean, you've literally doubled carcass weight in one jump. You know, we work in an industry where 1%ers are considered a great outcome in terms of genetic gain. I can remember many years ago in Townsville, where I spent 10 very happy years. We had a carcass competition up there. A Droughtmaster won the competition. I forget whether it was from Lisgar or Kirkney or one of the Home Hill Droughtmaster operations. Marble score 4 off grass, and yet it was way before any DNA testing. We didn't have any ability to try to trace back to identify parentage or anything. But I suppose the first question is, how did you do it with the quail? And you know, are we on the right track? Should Droughtmasters, if you're going to go down a brand phase, should you be focusing on marbling, or where does the focus need to be if you're going to continue to make, you know, colossal genetic gains like you've just seen in quail?
Yeah, well, firstly, mate, we bought the quail with those genetic gains. Haven't been made over 30 years. So a guy called Charlie Scott, an eccentric Maitland farmer. And look, poultry and beef are our biggest businesses. In a sense, that's enabled us to go on this little R&D journey with quail. But yeah, I mean, as I said, he for 30 years, when everyone else was culling their supersized quail breeders, he was retaining them and effectively developed his own breed. We've had a very good poultry geneticist on board since, a guy called Michael Summerlad, who developed the Summerlad free-range chicken. And he's increased it when we started. So we have seen some gains. When we started, 10% of our birds were 350 grams to 400, now 45%. And now we're getting probably 20% of 500 grams. And there's no funny business out. That's just good selection. So obviously investing in that. But again, look, where do I think the Droughtmaster is positioned? Probably better people. But look, I think there is a swing back. Just speaking to Harvey at Moda yesterday, he says there is a swing against the heavily marbled product. People are more health conscious. It's too rich for them. I just think a good, solid, honest steak that really tastes like beef. We finish our cattle on silage, our Droughtmasters, and the flavour. I mean, some of the Droughty crew came out. The flavour's superb, and it's clean tasting. I think that's where we bat. Obviously, from what we've seen in our little, we kill quite a few of our own cattle each week, but it's a very minor sample. There does seem to be some yield challenges for us. But then, you speak to someone like Childsy and he'll say they eat much less. But I haven't been able to test that yet, mate. But yeah, I think we stick right down the middle, a consistent, accessible, clean tasting, delicious bit of beef.
Great. One more quick one from the floor. Anybody? Over here.
Duncan, I just regards Dean Allen, just regards to the name Droughtmaster in regards to branding. Is that going to be an issue at all, or you're happy with that name when it comes to branding?
Yeah, look, again, I'd be interested in John's insights on this. Look, what I've learnt if you've got relationship, you can talk people around on most things. I can remember going to Asia the first time, and they were insisting our quail had to be free range. And I said, look, they're grown on a free range farm. He said, they have to be free range. He said, well, if you're into animal welfare, you don't want those little quail running out there with all those hawks. And, they're a bloody walking smorgasbord, And they quickly got that. And since then, with my distributors, hasn't come up. So I think Droughtmaster is, look, I think you guys are the best salesmen. Look, Charlie Hawkins was an absolute rock star that day. He was just Charlie. He talked about this and that. He was politically incorrect. He called Aboriginals blackfellas. He did everything. But they loved him. And so I think I think we need to start very small. I think we hitch ourselves to some real influencers, and I think they will quickly tell us if the name's okay or not. But I think you can make it sell because it's an authentic breed. People know we live with droughts, and this is a breed that's flourished in spite of that and remains in that pristine country, not industrial farming, blah, 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 blah. I think we can make it work, yeah. But I'm certainly not welded to that name either,
Your experience in restaurants and, pubs, whatever, when people that are not involved in the industry and not, overly familiar with Droughtmasters, they look at, I've spoken to people not involved in the industry, and I said, what do you think of when you see the name Droughtmaster? And they said, a desert, camel in the desert.
Yeah, and it may, I don't know if John thinks, but look, what I'm finding is people are really, they're very much hitched to their chefs. So if they go there and Harvey, vintage beef. A whole bunch of people had vintage beef that night. They didn't know what it was, but Harvey thought it was fantastic, and so did they. I tell you, these chefs are real influencers, and free access, and they love farmers. It's great.
It's a good point, Dean. My only comment would be Droughtmaster's a great name for a cattle breed. Somewhat more challenging for a beef brand, I would suspect. Look, would you put your hands together again for Duncan, please, for a very insightful address.